Hello everybody and welcome to the Magical Learning Podcast for this week. This week we talked to Callum McKirdy, who is an amazing guy and he lives over in Dunedin in New Zealand. We talked about harnessing neurodiversity in the workplace. Callum himself suffers from ADHD and dyslexia, so he understands what it's like to be in those environments and understand what it's like to have that experience. He also was only diagnosed later in life, so he also understands how some people who may not be diagnosed may feel in the workplace. It's an amazing conversation. He's really funny and we had a great chat. Enjoy and have a magical week. Hello everybody and welcome to the Magical Learning Podcast for this week. As you can tell by the title of this episode, we do have a guest and we'll get to them shortly. But firstly, let's jump around the room and see how our regulars are doing. John, you were first in on the call today. John, how are you going this week?
I'm doing great, Jez. I suppose events of the week have made me realise just how important it is to be simple and keep things basic and not get stressed about stuff when you've got no control over it. So, Danette, in terms of the text you sent me just before, no, I'm sweet. So it's all good. So yeah, great week.
Nice. Awesome. Well, good to hear, John. Good lesson there as well. Al, how are you going this week?
Going well, thanks, Jez. Probably similar to what John was saying. Yes, sometimes I know I can get caught up in the little things, and we've had a big thing going on over the past week, which kind of led to Renee and I just going out for a paddle on the water this morning by ourselves, which was really lovely. Nice,
that's good. Al, always out on the water. It's always good to hear. Love that. Danette, how are you going this week?
Yeah, great, Jez. I'm in Canberra at the moment, which is very exciting, and hopefully going to pick up a little doggy for mum and dad this weekend, because for those that don't know, my parents lost their dog. It had a big tumour that couldn't be operated on, so they've been very sad since then. So crossing fingers I'll actually be able to pick it up tomorrow and take it down to them on Sunday. So yeah, which would be awesome. But other than that, having an awesome week. And I think the whole thing about simple and control what you can control, that message from John really resonates.
Well, that's great. And that's very exciting about the new dog. I'm sure we'll send some pictures on social media for people that want to check out what that dog looks like. And now I'm going to awkwardly ask Leggers while she's on her public tram, how are you going this week, Leggers?
Yeah, sorry about that. Just heading home from uni. But yeah, this week has been good. It's been nice weather, as you can maybe see out this tram window here. But lovely day. So I'm excited to, experience the afternoon.
Good work, Leggers. All right, you can go back on mute now. And Callum, how are you going this week?
I'm very well. Nice to see you. Nice to meet you all, team. I'm a bit jealous about the weather that Allegra's got there. I am in Dunedin, New Zealand, right at the bottom of the South Island. And all day it's been threatening. So it's been nice and warm, but then a thunderstorm is just coming through and it is now persisting down with rain. And I'm a bit over the rain. So, yeah, let's see if it clears up. But I'm glad to be here. Looking forward to having a good chat.
Yeah, and we're stoked to have you on. Hopefully the weather will clear up by the end of this podcast. We're just sending some good vibes over. Now, Callum, we're so excited to have you on. You have your own podcast called You, Me and ADHD, and you are sort of in the process of writing. You've got a sort of book that is eventuating as we sort of speak. So do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, and for people that may be being introduced to you for the first time right now? Yeah, give us a little bit of who you are and maybe a bit about those two things as well.
Sure thing. Thanks, Jez. My name's Callum. I do live in New Zealand. I do a lot of work across New Zealand and Australia. And my background is in sort of HR, people management systems, culture change, that sort of thing. So quite broadly, like people and capability. About 22 years in and around that industry. And I went out on my own probably about 8 years ago doing your standard sort of team building, leadership development, jack of all trades, master of none type thing. But always wanted to be self-employed, be my own boss. And we'll probably get into the reason for that pretty soon as well. But one thing, I'm 46 years old. When I was 42, I was diagnosed with ADHD, and I always knew that I had dyslexia. I didn't know that I also have dyscalculia, which is essentially, like, if we sort of dumb that down a little bit, it's just the numbers version of dyslexia. And I'll talk a wee bit about that as well. So I always knew those sort of things were going on, but the ADHD was, I guess, one of the final pieces of the puzzle. And that's why a lot of what I did never made sense, and why I spent most of, in fact, all my life hacking things, reworking, having to lie, scheme, cheat in some regards, but essentially make up my own ways of doing things, for simple things like the way I tie my shoelaces. Those, like, I can't do it the way most people do, right? And so I've always found myself hacking those systems. So that ADHD diagnosis locked a few things in place, but I always thought, hang on, I feel quite normal. But turns out it's, a lot of things I do aren't particularly normal, just normal being common, right? And I thought, well, my experience must be something that is shared by a few other people around the workplace in particular. And I've got this expertise, sort of 2 decades around people management systems and processes. And I also have this lived experience of not really fitting in at work. And so I've sort of turned my work into bridging the gap between people management processes and systems, so that employee life cycle, and people that don't feel like they fit at work, and how do we harness what they bring naturally. Because at the end of the day, every workplace, every organization has a cohort of people who are neurodivergent, and I can talk a wee bit about that umbrella term as well, because there's a bit of mythology and misunderstanding around that too. But every workplace has a cohort of people who are neurodivergent. Now, it could be up to sort of 15 to 20%. And 80% of people who are neurodiverse are undiagnosed, which means they have no idea what's going on for them either. They just know they don't fit in. And usually what that means is people hide, they shirk work, they work harder after hours just to look like they're coping. They mask a whole lot of things. So it's a lot of extra effort, and they're capping their own potential. And that's why we see performance sort of plateau and people not reaching their potential. And there's a whole lot of other characteristics that we can get into. But I thought, actually, that's quite a nice little avenue for me to go down and work with people who are a wee bit different, who think differently, whose minds have essentially work slightly differently to others, and help them, I guess, what I call uncover, unlock, and unleash that potential at work, which means, we don't have to look for neurodiverse people because they're already in the organization. So it's like tapping into something that's already untapped. I'm also an incredibly nosy person. I'm a bit of a stalker. You could call me a voyeur. I love airports. I love planes. I love travel. I love newness. I love change. I love going into just watching other people, right? I could easily waste a day just sitting somewhere watching people and making up stories as to where I think people are going and what they're doing. Because I've had this world in my head that's far more vivid than the actual real world. And so I studied anthropology and human geography, which is essentially just where people live and what they do while they're there. And that was entirely useless until I fell into HR by accidentally applying for the wrong role, being fed up of rejection and going into an interview that I didn't know what the job was about, and thinking I'm not going to get it anyway. So I just had a great chat and was just myself, and they loved me and I got the job. And so I kind of fell into HR, but I realized that all that is essentially where people work and how they behave the way they do, and why they often behave a bit weirdly than we expect. And so that's the way I've drawn the link between, a massive student loan, which got me a degree that was pretty useless, to actually using some of those concepts. And I just love that. And I actually use that curiosity and cheekiness in the work that I do with people, just to help people be who they are at work. Wow, that was waffly. I'm going to stop there.
Well, I think you've actually led us perfectly into the topic today, and that was all great, Callum. So good and interesting to hear. I'm excited to hear how this all weaves into the conversation today as well. But you sent over a topic which I loved, which is harnessing neurodiversity in the workplace, which is obviously what you were just talking about, and we're excited to talk to about it. I think that Al had a great question to start off with. So, Al, I might throw to you. What was your question, and why did you pick it?
Yeah, listening to you there, Callum, I'm a little bit like you, where I love watching people and machines. The other thing, I learn a lot from watching machines, and I was on a job site recently where I was driving a scraper, and basically we're just moving as much dirt from the hole up onto the pad as fast as we can.
Yeah.
There were 4 machines there, and they were all different. And it kind of frustrated me to think, why didn't they just bring 4 of the best machine in? But as the day went on, I realised some machines were great on the really hard soil. The one that I was driving, which I thought, it's the small one, it's not much good. It was the only one that could get into the really wet areas. And I guess that was my big awareness, to think people are the same. Yep. There is no one perfect person. Some of us have just got that one skill that we need at the right time, which led to my question, and that is, what are some of the different skills that neurodiverse people have access to?
Well, yeah, I mean, a great question, and it's really you've kind of answered it as well, Alan, because the fact is we're all different, right? So it's about the key is to safely uncover those those skills. Like, a lot of people, often we talk about people who are neurodivergent have some sort of superpower, right? And I think, and I like that term. But it's not entirely accurate. I think the reason we refer to them as being superpowers is because they're just a bit rare, because it's just an amplified ability. And there's a couple of things we kind of need to clear up as well, because neurodiversity as a term is an umbrella term, and it's a bit of a misnomer, because nobody has the same brains, right? Like, we're all basically, the structure's roughly the same. Nobody's brains are the same. We're all wired a little bit differently, and we're even using those that terminology. Like, there are no wires in the brain, right? And so neurodiversity is often about how you produce and process particular chemicals or hormones, neurochemicals in the brain. It can also be how the brain interprets information, like how it takes it in, processes it, spits it out, etc. And so the difference is in there, but also PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, is also classed as neurodiversity, right? And so there's this big umbrella term where we've got people who are born within their brain, the structure or the way they process things happens. So they're born that way, right? So nothing needs to be cured, nothing needs to be fixed. They're not broken. They just do things a wee bit differently. But then there's PTSD, which is about an event that has happened, which has had such is so traumatic that it actually permanently rewires how things fire around the brain, right? And so that's why it's collected under neurodiversity. But you've got things like autism, ADHD, dyslexia. They're the big 3. But Tourette's, sometimes bipolar, is under this umbrella term. And so we've got to be really, really careful, because some of those aren't related at all. And I think when we're talking about the harnessing, I think the harnessing is the enabling people to best use what they do naturally. And I think that's really important as well, which means, we don't actually have to work that hard. It doesn't cost any extra. We have to find out what these people can do. So to answer your question, to actually get to the answer, Alan, you've got people who have one, they tick a box for one type of neurodivergence, say dyslexia. And that in itself brings a number of really cool abilities that actually have nothing to do with spelling, reading, or writing, because we think dyslexia is a learning disability, but it's the system, it's the way we teach people that is the problem. Dyslexics are actually amazing learners. They just learn in a way that often isn't taught, right? And so that's where people get tripped up. So the system's broken, the person isn't broken. But the thing that doesn't necessarily connect with that is dyslexics often have really, really deep empathy and are often the most empathic people that you ever meet. Like, they can get in, they can read a room, that sort of thing. And so that's a great skill in itself. You've got autistic people who often, what we tend to think of as what autism looks like is Rain Man, like a 35, 40-year-old movie, which is the most extreme and probably as far away from what common autism actually looks like, right? For most people who are autistic, you can't tell. You wouldn't know. And so those stereotypes don't necessarily help there, but they can really hyper-focus. A lot of people can, because there's a deep passion in something. Sometimes it looks like an obsession, but it's just a natural ability to focus on something. So, for example, they're really good often with spreadsheets, or we sometimes go with maths, but it's problem identification, seeing patterns, coding things, really meticulous in things. And that's quite different from dyslexia and deep empathy. But if you were to combine those, there's quite a cool combination. ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, terrible name. It's not a deficit of attention. If anything, it's a deficit of an ability to pay attention to one thing at a time. And it's not a disorder as well, because disorder implies that it's something that can be fixed. There are some strategies we can put in place to minimize the struggle, but also that brings with it like huge creativity and pattern recognition, drawing links between things. Now, if you were, for example, to combine a couple of those, which is often the case, around about 10% of the population has dyslexia. Around sort of 3 to 5% of adults have ADHD, and almost around about 1, maybe 2% of people are on the autistic spectrum, right? And so there's differences there, but often one neurodivergence comes with another. There's they call it comorbidity, but that's just a rubbish term in itself as well. No one's ever died of dyslexia, but it's But dyslexia and ADHD are quite common, right? ADHD and autism are quite common. Dyslexia and autism, that's not that common. But if you think about those traits I talked about, deep empathy with dyslexia, and say the ability to be really creative with ADHD, you combine those and you can get some creative empathy in there. So, for example, an ideal job for that is like UX testing, user experience testing, because what those people can do is put themselves in the situation of the end user in lots and lots of different scenarios, so they can imagine themselves in that and then test from that perspective. And that's something that, a lot of, as we refer to most people, neurotypical people can't necessarily do. So does that answer a bit of the question, Alan?
It does, Callum. I feel like you're talking directly to me, like when you say some people see the world through patterns and think, yes, that's me.
Yeah.
And I guess the big takeaway from that is, rather than thinking, but all the other things I can't do, what I'm hearing is, find a place where that fits and I'm in flow. And, how great 100%, is that?
100%. And so that's the key, right? Because it's not about saying, okay, so I think the future success of organizations will come through harnessing neurodiversity. It's untapped. There have always been, we've always existed in workplaces. We've just been working at like 70, 80%. And so what we're actually looking at doing now is keep the 4 types of machines you described earlier, but just how do we harness those to go, actually, we need something to get in there and small and create a bit of a cavity there where something bigger can get in and scour some stuff out, and then something a wee bit different, a bit more nimble comes in and tidies up, that sort of thing. And it's just using people a wee bit differently. Now, I use the term using with a bit of I've got to be cautious there, because it's not about using and abusing, and it's also not about outing people as well, but it is about creating cultures where people can come and if they feel safe to be their whole selves and go, actually, I'm rubbish at this, but I'm really good at this. And so it becomes not about neurodiversity at all. It becomes about being human at work. And that's fundamentally what everybody wants, right? Everybody's just looking to be valued and for people to see what they can contribute. And what I'm saying is what people can contribute naturally without trying, there's a recipe for success.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much, Callum.
No trouble.
Yeah, and I think that was great, Callum. Thanks so much for that. Great insight as well. And I think it lends us perfectly to Lega's question. So, Lega's, I think yours is kind of a piggyback off of that one. So tell us about your question, why you picked it.
So I actually don't have it in front of me because I'm on my phone, but from memory, it was along the lines of like, what are some of the benefits of having neurodiversity inclusion in a workplace or in like teams? And like, how can you, I guess, like the team learn to work with them and also like them to work with the team, like really mesh together, I guess.
Yeah. It's a big question because you've like the glib answer is like, it's a no-brainer to harness neurodiversity because it's always existed. And also one of my arguments is then if you've got 10, 15, let's just say 20% at a stretch of the organization who have something going on which is holding them back from being their best at work, why not tap into that? Like, why not be curious around that? But again, like I say, you've got around 80% of neurodivergent people who are undiagnosed, so they don't know what's going on. So we've got to make it safe for those people to talk about difference. But neurodiversity is one of those diversity, equity, and inclusion sort of categories. I don't like box ticking exercises, but it kind of ticks multiple boxes. It doesn't discriminate. It does not care about your gender. It doesn't care about your ethnicity, your socioeconomic status, anything like that. Like, anybody can be dyslexic. Anybody can have ADHD. And because it's ingrained in the brain naturally, it's how we just experience the world slightly differently. It means that it's actually one of those, I think it's probably the diversity, equity, and inclusion categories that actually has a return on investment. If we invest in it and harness what people do naturally, then and their natural skills and talents and ability to take in but also apply knowledge, then that works really well. Because what we've done is we've fooled ourselves as we've been pretending to try and solve the gender pay gap, to end racial and ethnic discrimination in the workplace and in society. I mean, we could have solved those sort of things. We just essentially fundamentally, I think, don't want to. But that's another conversation. But the harnessing neurodiversity means that we actually live up to what we've always said happens if we have a more diverse board or management team, which fundamentally is there's this myth that research has shown that if we have a more diverse set of people around the table, performance improves. Now, then nothing's ever proved that. It's a load of rubbish. What it actually does, and this is the misinterpretation of that, is when we have greater diversity around the table, we have the opportunity for greater performance because we have different experiences and perspectives and perceptions. So the opportunity's there, but we still have to do the work. We still have to include people. We still have to help people feel like they belong. And that's the work. It's not getting people to the table. It's what we do when we're at the table. You could have a really diverse board, but still have a racist or a misogynistic board chair who stifles any of those individuals' ability, right? With neurodiversity, because people do things naturally, we can put people to work in things that they're really interested in, so they can hyper-focus, that they do naturally, which means skill acquisition is a lot easier as well. We can double down on the things that people do well, as opposed to have people fill these really broad job descriptions with some things that they're never going to be able to achieve. So we may be able to do a lot of this stuff, but there's small admin things that are the holdup. And, that was my case in my career. And what we do is we think everybody else can do this really, really easily, so I should be able to do this. So we invest a whole lot of time, energy, effort, emotion, and trying to get better at something that we'll fundamentally never be able to do. And what that does is it takes us away from the stuff that we do really, really well. And so what I'm doing now, Allegra, is waffling, trying to remember what your question is, because I think I don't know. Does that answer any of your questions?
It does, yes. I feel like my question was definitely a piggyback of sort of Alan's question as well. So I feel like it's definitely been answered. But yeah,
it was double-barreled, right? There were two parts to your question, and I think I might have answered the second part, not the first.
And how do we encourage, I guess, teams and workplaces to, I guess, meld everyone together?
Well, so it's about this again. No, that's great. Thank you. Perfect. It's about ignoring the fact that it's about neurodiversity, right? That's my entry in, but essentially all I want is for organizations to go, we've got a bunch of difference here. Let's think differently about different thinking, because everybody thinks a wee bit differently. Some people think a bit more differently than others, right? So let's make it safe for people to talk about what they struggle with, to talk about what lights them up, to talk about what they're really good at. Often those are the things that they do outside of work. And so they don't get to bring their whole self to work. And that's where we kind of need to make some of the workplace conversations not about work at all. It's like, what are you into? Why is that? Because people who are neurodivergent often can't explain how they've made links. Like, for example, with my ADHD, I'm really good at linking ideas that make no sense to other people. My struggle, because of my dyslexia, is I find it really hard to explain how I got there. And so my ideas don't get taken on board, because while I can make the leap, I can't explain the leap. And that's frustrating for me, because 3-6 months down the track, I go, told you so, we should have done that. When someone else who is articulate can go, we should have just done this. And I'm like, we've just wasted 6 months. Yeah. And so that's the learning for me. I need to figure out how do I put myself in this project manager's shoes and experience, and speak to them in language that they can understand, which means I have to take time and prepare some stuff a wee bit more as well. So I have to do the work. I can't just go, these two things, they're linked, go off and do that, because then I just look crazy, right? And we all know crazy people with crazy ideas. I think that's the thing with people with crazy ideas, is they don't think they're crazy. Like, they can see the real world application in that. I just can't explain it. Yeah. I don't know if that answers your question either.
No, it was great. Thank you. I really like the part about being curious about people's sort of personal life, I guess, and trying to figure out how to sort of include that, or parts of that, into the workplace. Because yeah, I definitely think I definitely get hyper focused when I'm doing my study, and it's just 5-6 hours will go by and I haven't stood up or done anything, and I'm just
yep. Well, that's right. I often say that I can do
really like doing it,
Yeah, well, I can do 2 days worth of work in 2 hours, but likewise, I can also go for 2 days and get 2 hours worth of work done.
Yeah.
I think actually I'm just, making that up, because I could do 2 days and not getting anything done, right? Because it's just distraction. But when I am hyper focused into something, time goes. And that's another part of ADHD. It's time blindness. So I actually have no concept of time. I'm conscious I am time blind, so I'm never late for things. However, I have been known to look out the window. I've got a coaching call in 7 minutes and go, lawns look a bit long. I reckon I can tick those off. And I'm there doing the lawns, and half an hour later, as I'm finishing them, looking back going, that's an amazing pattern. I go, there's this nagging feeling that I should be somewhere else, right? And that's, so I have no real concept of time. 2 minutes and 2 years are of the same gravity. And that trips me up. So I've got to be very, very diligent and strategic with my time as well.
Awesome. Well, Callum, that's a great answer, and that was a great insight as well just then. I might throw it over to Danette, and Danette, I might get you to ask your question, and then I think Marg's is a good combo question to kind of put with yours as well, so we can kind of look at both of them at the same time. So maybe tell us a bit about why you chose it as well.
So my question, and then I'll say why I chose it, was what are some of the common mistakes organisations make around that stops them from harnessing neurodiversity? And to bring in Margs, she talked about what are some of the ways leaders can best support and embrace neurodiversity in the workplace. So maybe we focus at that leadership space about, what are they missing? What could they do better? And I suspect some of them are really small practices that they can bring in place.
Yeah,
I love tactical, practical applications of stuff. So I figured you've probably got some great stories and great ideas that can help organisations just really do this better.
So drawing a link from what the last bit you said, Danette, about stories, it's actually about having conversations. The problem a lot of organizations do, like the mistakes, the common mistakes that you refer to, are not having the conversation when an issue shows up, and also waiting for things to become an issue as well. Because those sort of problems don't ever have to happen. In the past, and early on in my HR career, I remember I had a manager who couldn't handle this person who was particularly challenging in their team. And I have always wondered what's happened with that person. I always feel guilty for the process we put in place, because essentially we managed that person out because they were difficult. In hindsight, and with a greater amount of knowledge now, I know that person was quite far along the autistic spectrum, right? And so they were blunt, they were challenging, but they just spoke what they saw. So they were truth tellers.
Yep.
And we had a weak manager who couldn't handle that, right? And so part of it is about going, okay, we've got some difference here. How do we harness that? How do we target that and go, thinking of a name who's not on the call, Alex. We'll go, Alex, you're one of these truth tellers, right? And you'll see, and I think sometimes you don't pick up on the impact some of the things you say has on the rest of the team. However, we love your ability to do that. And so we give Alex the type of work where he needs to pull some stuff apart and challenge, right? We also need to make it really safe for the rest of the team to go, actually, I'm not going to be wedded to that idea being mine. It's just an idea. So Alex can tear the idea apart, but he's not tearing me apart. So I think that's part of the conversation we need to do as well. I think also one of the real problems, and this is fundamentally in that sort of recruitment space that organizations have, is we follow this practice called recruiting for fit, and it's absolute rubbish, because we'll say, oh, it's for values fit, but no, it's not. It's actually, we're looking for people who are easiest to manage. So we're looking for people with minds like mine, and not mine, but the manager, right? So who do I have an affinity with? Who do I connect with? That sort of thing. And often with people who are neurodivergent, the traditional what I would say old school recruitment processes of having a CV and a cover letter, sending it in with an application form, often online, to then be weeded out through that, invited to an interview in an environment which is not like the workplace, that they'll spend most of their time in. It might be a meeting room, but it's not actually around where the desks are or whatever else. Being asked questions that they will never, ever get asked again in their work, and to describe how they've done things in the past that they may never ever get to use again as well. And so we have these processes that are designed to trip people up and weed people out, as opposed to allow people doing the recruiting, making the decision, to see the best in people. A lot of people who are neurodiverse struggle putting themselves forward. You've got people who often, people with really, really deep focused talents can't think on the fly. And that's often what an interview's like. It's like an exam. What can you recall? Getting tripped up on that. And people can't be their best. But also, you've got people, there's a thing called misophonia. I don't know if you've heard of that. It's a response to pitch and frequency. So some people who it's relatively common with autism, and slightly common with ADHD as well. So chewing, clicking of pens. My daughter cannot stand the sound of cutlery on a plate. Drives her wild. Like, goes from perfectly calm, lovely to Jekyll and Hyde. Like, get out of the way. She's about to, stab you in the face. And just from that, right? And so that can be really distracting. Or light. If we're having an interview in a room that's windowless and people can't have natural light, like that's a real trigger. And you might think that someone with ADHD who fidgets in order to listen is bored or is really nervous. And so we go, we don't need that person, right? So we write people off for the wrong thing. So I think recruiting for fit isn't great. We put people in boxes. We have really rigid criteria around what we expect in a job. We have really rigid criteria around what performance and success and the right way of doing things looks like as well. And one of the risks, this is kind of a bit of a leap in terms of your question, Danette, is one of the risks with COVID is having 3 years of shooting us, like fast forwarding us into the future. Like, we were always going to use Zoom and Teams and online stuff. We were already doing that, right? But that sort of fast tracked our use for that. And here in New Zealand, when COVID hit, the Prime Minister said, you've got 3 days, go home, stay there, right? And everybody down tools, we're really compliant. The whole country did that. But what that enabled people to do is to cover up how hard they work just to look normal, to look like they're coping. And so it's actually been really, really difficult for neurodivergent people, because you can go, oh, freedom, you can have a home office and it can all be set up. Like, I love plants. I've set this up. So this is like a jungle. It's an oasis. It's my sanctuary. But also I like things for people to talk about and have in the background as a distraction if they get sick of looking at me. But what it also means is that when we can work from home late at night and we can timestamp emails to go out at 7:55 in the morning, but actually it was sent at 2:55 in the morning, it actually hides the amount of work that people are doing just to act normal. So we've got to be really careful. It comes back to avoiding the conversation. We need to talk to people who we think are neurodivergent, or just are a wee bit different, are displaying some behaviours, and to say, I've noticed this. What's going on? Do you have any idea? What can we do to help you with that? And it's about team culture. It's about making it really easy to have conversations about what you notice, because I think the best thing a leader can do is notice their people, and to explore that with a person, right? It's about noticing, listening, feedback. It's just easy human connection, which, we put off and say we're too busy to do that. So that's the real leadership skill, is to be unafraid of leading difference. And that requires a bit of, self-awareness. You just took yourself off mute and then muted yourself again, Danette, so jump in.
No, I love that. And though the conversations are rich. So pre-COVID, because we love to learn about how people learn really effectively, we used to have pipe cleaners in all of our rooms, and we would say, if you're a person that's really tactile, feel free, because we know that you're actually listening. And in fact, if we need you to sit still, that's going to stop you being able to learn really effectively. So that I love the fact that, we need to, whether it's in the workplace, in the learning, think about how we make this so that everyone can be really effective. So love that answer.
Well, it's, there's also benefits of working from home as well, right? I get to, I'm at a standing desk, but I'm sitting because I like to wriggle my feet around. And so they're hanging down, and that helps me listen. I have over here, I have a silent drum pad with some drumsticks. When I'm coaching, I drum with those. So I tap out a tune, and that helps me listen, because often we think, the typical primary school boy with ADHD, we tell them to sit on their hands and to stop fidgeting, but they're actually doing that because they need some stimulation. And when we're stimulated, we can listen. If you tell me to stop fidgeting, all I'm doing is thinking about the urge to fidget, and I don't hear a word you say. And so I have, fidget rings. I make figurines out of blue tack. And line them up here. And nobody gets to see that, right? And so people don't get to accuse me of doodling, of being distracted, of not paying attention. But it's the way I pay attention, by doing things. To the point where now, if I can do some in-person coaching, we go for walks. Because it works for me, but it works for people. I think also... as a parent, when you ask your kids some things face to face across the dinner table, they never want to talk about anything. But if you're sitting in the car driving side by side, when you're not looking at each other, you hear some stuff. And so walking meetings work. And I think that is the point, is workplaces need to explore, how do we do things a little bit differently but still get the same, if not better, outcomes. And part of that is exploring, where do we diverge as well as converge? Because, this recruit for fit, sort of looping back to that, is we want people to all be roughly the same, and we're not. And actually, it's the fact that we diverge that's our point of difference, right? Because no team is, and this is what I often say, if I'm working with a team, say online or in a room, this team, like, imagine if we were a team, well, you're a team, the collective of skills and experience, of insight, of inspiration and aspirations, that combination has never existed anywhere on the planet. And it will never exist again. And so my question for you, if you were the leader and we're talking to this team, is, are you making the best use of that difference, that uniqueness? Most of them aren't. And that's all it is. So again, we start with neurodiversity, but it's actually about how do we just recognize that we're all a wee bit different, and that's a good thing. Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
So Callum, I might just get just a quick answer to this last question, then we'll go around the room and grab some final thoughts from everybody. But if you have just a quick quick maybe story or quick anecdote about this, I guess I just wanted to know, for people that, listening, maybe have been in business for a while and this might be their first time they're sort of interacting with this type of conversation, what is the experience of being neurodiverse like in a workplace? And obviously it's different for everybody, but what's a story maybe that may be able to explain it for people?
Okay, so you said quick 6 times, so I've taken the hint. And so I'll do my best, Jez. Feel free to just mute me, cut me off, right? I don't have permission to speak for anybody else, but I've heard lots and lots of stories. So I'll speak about my stories, which are very, very common. And again, going back to the fact that I have this history in HR, and I have lived experience, entire life being neurodiverse, but only the last sort of 4 years knowing what my difference really is. So I went all the way through through school, through university, into my falling into my career and changing jobs. So I would change jobs about every 3 years. And I said that was because I would get bored and I liked a bit of change. The truth of that is that after about 18 months, people cottoned on that I couldn't do some of the things that they thought I could do, that I was working weekends and nights just to be average. And I couldn't understand what that was. And I couldn't explain how I showed really great potential. And this was probably the crushing thing and the real imposter syndrome in me. And that occurs with almost every neurodiverse person who has some semi-self-awareness, is that when you're told you have so much potential, but you're not fulfilling that or executing on that, like that's crushing. One key characteristic of ADHD is also this thing called RSD, rejection sensitivity dysphoria, which means we essentially just blow criticism, just exaggerate it, like it's crushing, regardless of how small it is. And I was always told that I was not fulfilling my potential, had lots of it, didn't fulfill it. People cottoned on that I couldn't do things that they thought I could or should be able to do. And so I started looking for jobs, and I just skipped jobs. Thankfully, because I was fun to work with and I was good in a team and people liked me in meetings and sort of project teams and idea generation, that I found it easy to get other jobs. But I skipped around. So changing jobs, running essentially was what I was doing, running from the truth. And not being able to explain that. Couple of really tangible examples of what it's like. I used to work for one of the big 4 consulting firms, and every Friday we had to do our billing, like the time system, account for every 6 minutes. Someone with time blindness, like that's a waste of time, right? However, it was also an online system with drop-down boxes. So I have time blindness, so I can't remember what I've done. I don't even know what I had for lunch today. But I have sequential dyslexia as well, which means you give me a list of things to do, 3 things. By the time you get to the second one, if you're telling them verbally to me, by the time you get to the second one, first one's a bit sort of hazy. Get to the third one, that number 1 doesn't exist, which is why I struggle with, your questions. And thankfully you put them up in the chat and they're right here for me to see, and I really appreciate that sort of thing. So that's just something there. But so I would hide in the toilets on Friday afternoons when I had to do my billing, and people would be like, where is Callum? And one of my staff would fill that in. And we would probably undercharge, not overcharge, but undercharge clients because of that. And so effectively I was ripping off the business because I couldn't work the system. So my sequential dyslexia means that, when you go into an organization and you need to sign in on an iPad and it says, who are you meeting and where are you from, that sort of thing. When screens disappear, such as on ATMs, money machines, or checking in at the e-kiosk and at the airline, I know all the screens that are going to appear, but I forget the sequence they come in, and so I start to panic. And so anything with a drop-down box, I'm gone. If I have to scroll on a website, goodbye. So really, really simple things like that, hiding in the toilets when I had to do my billing. The thing that actually tripped me up and made me go, I'm not for the workplace because I'm unemployable, is I was the HR director of a quite a large charity, and we decided to implement some psychometric testing as part of our recruitment processes. And we needed a guinea pig, and I was like, I'll give this a go. These are fun. Like, I'm really good with pattern recognition. And went through this, and I can remember thinking we should not be using these tests because they're just too simple. I was going, I'm flying through this. Thought I aced them, right? But then when we got the results, it was, and no word of a lie, it was as if I had been given the answers to every question beforehand and chosen to ignore them all. It was an absolute disaster. And I couldn't explain it. I didn't know what was going on. And so that really tripped me up and also made people go, actually, he can't even fundamentally, like his numerical reasoning is atrocious. So I have dyscalculia, which means that I can't, I like bank account numbers, phone numbers. Thankfully, they're in a phone. I get tripped up with those. When I see multiples of the same digits beside each other, I don't know if there's 2, 4, 6 of them. Like it just goes all over the place. And so I can't marry up spreadsheets, rows, columns, all these sorts of things. And so the experience, I guess, not being quick, Jez, the experience of being neurodiverse in the workplace is the basics, the absolute fundamentals that we take for granted are the things that give us the shits and make us go, I can't even do that. And they're asking me to do this. But often we can do these things, but we struggle with this, which is very early on in this call, we talked about jobs being really, really broad, like admin, hopeless. I'm absolutely hopeless at admin, but I'm great at idea generation. So give me that sort of stuff to do. But I'll labour on my billing forever. It'll take me forever to write an invoice or an email or something like that. And I shouldn't be doing some of those things, right? So it's harnessing what people do and making it okay for people to be a bit rubbish at the stuff that actually doesn't matter, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was great answer. And I feel like we got a lot of good bits and pieces from that. I feel like it was beautiful because I feel like I got to learn so much about specifically your perspective and what must be the perspective of a lot of people, you know, in the workforce. I might quickly grab everyone's final thoughts as well from the conversation. So I'll start with you, Al. Any final thoughts on today's conversation?
I just want to say thank you so much for today, Callum. I feel like the whole weight is lifted off my shoulder, like listening to a lot of your examples on things you can't do. I'm thinking, neither can I. And I've been beating myself up thinking, what's wrong with me? I've got to learn that. Where my focus is going over to, let's do the things I can do really easily. And some of those other things, find someone else who does those and enjoys doing those. And life will be so much easier.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Nice one. Thanks, Alan.
Love that, Al. Yeah, Danette, I'll throw to you now. Any final thoughts on today's conversation?
I love the whole conversation, Callum, and I definitely want to get you back for another conversation because this has been awesome. And I suspect our audience is going to take away a whole different insight about how they need to get more out of their people by thinking about the differences and bringing them in as people, the greatness that people bring, not, oh, they're different and that's bad. It's actually, they're different. This is awesome. How do we harness this? And I really liked you explaining about the psychometric testing and just, drop down menus and stuff like that in the sign in that can be complicated for a lot of people. I'm an accountant, but my skill set is language, not numbers. And I struggled when I did my accounting degree because I didn't understand the numbers or the language. I've been able to learn it and simplify it. But I think where a workplace actually looks and goes, okay, what do you love doing? What do you do outside of work? How can we harness more of that in the workplace? And what are we doing that's not working for you? And making it okay for people to say, actually, those timesheets, I agree with you, rubbish.
Yeah.
They're not, I don't work that way. Is there something else we can put in place that's going to solve that problem that I don't have to deal with that particular challenge because you're not getting the best out of me? So that was a great aha for me. So I loved it. An awesome conversation.
Awesome. Thank you. I mean, well, I wasn't employed to fill out timesheets, but it was part of my job.
Yep.
It was an area where we should go, actually, don't get him to do that. Like he holds us up every week, right? And with the psychometric testing, I don't know I've never come across an organization that has a role who's where somebody's employed to figure out whether the next shape is a square, a triangle, or a circle, right? And so it's just, it's just trickery.
Yes.
And it's just mean, right? So don't do that sort of thing. But also, I think with neurodivergent people, because I talk it up,
Yes.
like on this cup, ADHD positive, that's a group coaching program that I have. I'm ADHD positive. And what I mean by that is I tick it, I've got it, like I've got the certificate that says I've got that. But also I'm positive about it because while I get stuck and I struggle every day with really, really basic things that my kids take for granted, I also know that my ADHD, my combination of neurodivergence enables me to do some really, really amazing things. So I'm positive about it because my life is made so much better because I have ADHD. In fact, it is my life.
Yep.
And the dyslexia is also amazing as well, right? We've got to be careful that we don't think that everybody who's neurodiverse should be exceptional. Like we are actually allowed to just be average. Like we're fine. Yeah, that's all a lot of people want. But also, we think that we need to make big accommodations for people, and we don't. A lot of the accommodations for anybody who's any type of neurodivergence is low cost. It's not favoritism. It doesn't give people a leg up. It just puts them on a level playing field. And but also, like where we think the difficulty is, there's also some goodness in that as well. So, for example, and I know we're out of time, but my dyslexia means that I really struggle to read. I can read, but I'm really, really slow because what I have to do is convert every word into an image. So every word I read, I now have an image for all those sort of things. And the next word determines what the image for the previous word looks like as well, right? So that's constantly changing. That's just taking a lot of, a bit more energy and effort. But with my time blindness, sorry, not my time blindness, but with my lack of working memory, I've never once started a page, got to the bottom of it, and had any idea what's at the top of it, right? However, I'm an amazing proofreader because I have images for each word that I have to read, and if a word is not spelt correctly, it sticks out like it's already highlighted. Because I go, oh, I can't make an image for that. What is that thing, right? And so a lot of dyslexics are amazing editors. And yet the stuff that we write is horrific. Yeah. And so often we think we write off people because of a myth around that sort of stuff, but it's actually the opposite of that is a real superpower. Anyway, I've taken up too much of your time.
No, that was awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, I love that, Callum. That was awesome. Legas, I'll throw to you now. Any final thoughts on the conversation today?
I mean, it was a great conversation. I just wanted to say that, like, I love the idea of like leadership being curious about their sort of employees and like how best to harness like the individual skill set of each person and, you know, tailoring their position so that it gets both, you know, the best for the employer and the employee, basically, because you're doing something that you actually are good at and care about. But yeah, I think being curious is important, and I think that's a great takeaway from this.
Well, it's called an employment relationship, right? Like here in New Zealand, it's called the Employment Relations Act. And so leaders need to create a relationship with each of their people as individuals. So it's just getting to know people, but also the part of the conversation is about how leaders can work with people who are neurodiverse. We also get neurodiverse leaders, and perhaps that's for another conversation as well, because that's a minefield. But also it's there's some greatness that comes with that, but there's also some real stumbling blocks for people who are neurodiverse. In what we expect leaders to be like and how we hold up this ideal guru-like leadership aspiration. So anyway, there we go.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, so that was for people that are listening, we did have one question that we didn't get to that is around neurodiversity and leadership, which I think is a great topic for next time we have you on, Callum, because this was an absolutely great chat. And I feel like that's another great topic. We want to encourage people to go check out Callum on callummckirdy.com, and also you can check out the podcast. Now, just before we go, Callum, do you have any final thoughts on today's conversation?
No, I think I've said enough. I've prevented you from doing whatever you had to do on the half hour. I'm glad that Allegra got home safely, or at least managed to find a home with an open door and just busted on in and chose a room to sit in. So good. There we go. Hey, thanks very much for your time, everyone. I really appreciate it.
Oh, that was awesome.
Thank you.
Callum. Yeah, thank you so much.
To everybody that's listening at home, have a magical week.